Do we really need to save 25 times our projected retirement expenses in portfolio dollars? Do we really need that much money saved in our investments? It's a question that comes up quite a bit. One of the biggest things we do is we help retirees answer how much money they might need to live the life they want in retirement. And federal employees, your math might be a little bit different than private industry folks. That's because you have some great guaranteed income sources coming in, specifically the FERS basic annuity or your pension. Private folks would love to have this thing. It's an enviable benefit, right? And when you combine your pension benefits with Social Security, you may be a good chunk of the way towards what you need in terms of retirement income already without considering those investments and distributions from your portfolio, okay? So in this video today, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about how much retirement income you might need, how much you might spend. We're gonna talk about the retirement income sources, how to think through those, and how much you might need from your portfolio, what your multiple may look like. And I'm gonna give you an example at the end to make this super useful. You can walk through it on your own and create your own framework, hopefully from this case that we're gonna talk through. But first, guys, my name is Justin. I'm a financial planner. I've been doing this for a long time. We help federal families manage their investments, build custom financial plans. We work with people all over the country. So if you have questions, you're working on something in your financial plan, we'd love to hear from you and be a resource for you. So please feel free to go ahead and reach out. So back to the question at hand here today. What is your multiple? Well, let's talk about the retirement income that you may need. Estimating expenses can be a challenge. And admittedly, I'm not a big budgeting guy. I like to back into this stuff. I like to figure out how much I need to save and invest. And, then I can spend the rest freely and just, prioritize what it is at the moment. Okay. But that doesn't really work in retirement. You need to know what you're going to spend in a really detailed fashion, right? You need to get really granular about your spending so that you can make these numbers work. And so one of the best ways to do that is to determine how much you're spending today, because what we found is most retirees are going to spend about the same in retirement as they spend today. A couple reasons for that, right? The quality of life, once you don't really want to go backwards. Once you get accustomed to living a certain way, that's how you want to live going forward, okay? So you're going to spend about the same amount from that standpoint. Also, if you think some of your big expenses are going to drop off, I'm sure there's going to be something else that's going to step in and fill that void, right? So think about mortgage, taxes. Maybe those expenses drop somewhat in retirement, but in those early years, you're probably going to want to travel, experiences, time with kids, helping people out that you want to. All those expenses are going to step in and fill some of that gap. Also, when you get later in retirement, healthcare becomes a bigger issue. You need help around the house, you're going to spend on services. So that's just kind of the ebbs and flows of retirement spending. So what you want to do is think about how much you're spending today, go through it on a really detailed basis, look at your last 6 to 12 months, even to take into consideration unexpected and one-time expenses, because even though they're unexpected in one time, they continue to recur over time. We know that happens. And it's a real pain in the butt when it does, but it does happen. So take those into consideration as well, okay? And then come up with your number, somewhere between 80 to 100% is probably what we want to shoot for in terms of retirement income spending. So let's talk retirement income. If you're a federal employee, you've got the FERS basic annuity, and that may generate 25 to 30% of your pre-retirement income, not your expenses, your income, okay? And that's based on having a career 25 to 30 years of service, depending on what your multiplier and high 3 are, that's kind of where we get our calculation. Social Security can also replace 15 to 20% of your pre-retirement income, just depending on what your track record, your work history looks like, okay? And those numbers change, higher salaries, the percentage becomes a little bit lower, it just kind of works that way when you look at the math. And lastly, if there's any gap between your expenses and those two guaranteed income sources, you're gonna have to fill that with your investments, right? So whether it's retirement accounts, taxable accounts, real estate, whatever it is, you're gonna fill the gap with investment income, okay? If we're going back to our original question, the 25 times number, 20 times the portfolio value and projected expenses, that comes from the 4% rule. And we probably give the 4% rule a little bit more press than it's worth. It's really not a rule. It's a strategy. It's a framework, a benchmark, something we can use as a starting point and then make adjustments from there. But it is helpful from that standpoint. Okay. So it says basically you can take 4% of your portfolio and it gives you a greater probability of not outliving your money. Of course, you do need to be invested properly. And so I would say a word on that here. I think it's important to consider this, right? Using a professional when it comes to talking about managing investments in retirement is important for a few reasons. Number one, accumulation is a bit easier. I'm not going to lie to you. It is easier because you really need to focus on getting the money invested, keeping it invested in growth-oriented securities. Okay. That's your biggest task when it comes to accumulation. Now, when it comes to distribution, you got to consider some other factors, market volatility, right? There's a lot of ups and downs. And when you're taking income, those become magnified. They can have a snowball effect and derail your plan, right? So you got to manage volatility. You also have to invest for growth because we got inflation eating away at the portfolio. So if you want to give yourself pay raises and be able to keep up with the cost of living, there's got to be some sort of a growth element with within the portfolio. So it has to be structured properly. And then we got to consider taxes, right? Taxes they can take a really big bite out of your retirement income. So we need to work on that. And the sooner, the better, quite frankly. I think that's enough background for the sake of this video, and we can talk more detail on any of that if you want to have a conversation. All right, let's go ahead. Let's get right into the example, because I think this is where you're going to find the most value. Let's say we have a career federal employee, GS15, makes around $191,000 a year, 30 years of service, considering retiring here at age 62. The spouse, private industry, makes around $185,000 a year, also age 62, considering retiring at the same time. Okay, so what we want to do here is figure out what they're going to be spending, how much income they're going to have coming in, so we can get to that multiple number and kind of give you an idea of, is it 25, is it 15, is it 10? I don't know. Let's look at it, right? So if the federal employee, the GS15, retires, 30 years of service, let's say their high three was $191,900 a year, you get a 1.1% multiplier, because we said they're going out at 62. Now, if they went out before that, that would be a 1% multiplier. But in this case, that gives us a total pension of $63,327 a year. So great pension, right? 30 years of service, high paying job. So it makes sense. Now, we got to adjust that. They got a spouse, we just talked about. So survivor benefit protection is going to take 10% off. And then we're going to adjust for taxes as well. We're going to say 15%, which may or not be completely accurate, but for the sake of simplicity, that's what we're using in the example here. So that $63,000 comes down to $48,444 a year. Still a great chunk of guaranteed income coming in, okay? And that will be indexed, cost of living adjustments starting at age 62. So great thing there. Now, Social Security, they'll be eligible at age 62. And for the sake of simplicity, we're gonna look at, them taking it. We're not sure if that's the right decision or not. And it's really personal. There's a lot of factors to consider here. So don't blindly make this decision without thinking about it. But so the first employee, the GS15 federal employee, he's maxed out on the Social Security scale. Okay, so based on 2024 numbers, that benefit would be around $32,520 a year. Okay, so that's what we're going to work with. We got to adjust that for taxes too, because 85% of your Social Security benefit will be taxable. So that comes down to be $27,642 a year. So still a good chunk of change, $27,642. Spouse also going to claim Social Security. They didn't quite max out based on their work history. So that benefits around $2,500 a month, or $30,000 a year, times, our tax rate. So 85% of that is going to be taxable. Again, $25,500 a year is going to be the net benefit. So when we total all those up, we get a net number of $101,856 in guaranteed income from those sources after taxes, okay? Which is important, because we need to either adjust, the income for taxes or your expenses, building those taxes back in. One way or the other, you got to account for those things. And it's going to be important when we talk. So we put the cart before the horse a little bit here. We talked about their guaranteed retirement income. We know what they have coming in. So a little over $100,000 a year. What are they going to be spending? That's what we really need to focus on here. We need to prioritize this. So we can back into this for the sake of the example. They make a lot of money right now, $375,000 or more based on their two salaries, right? As gross income. Of course, now if we're looking at some of the deductions to that, right? There's obviously taxes that are going to come off, and there's going to be any savings. And we're going to say they're maxing out retirement plans and putting some money away. 20% of their income is basically what we're allocating towards savings and investment. So we can take off right around $160,000 a year in expenses and say they're going to spend about $215,000. That's our goal, is $215,000 in annual income within retirement. And that's not talking about taxes being part of that equation, okay? So $215,000 a year, right around $18,000 a month, okay? And we said from our conversation on the retirement income sources, we had around $101,000 accounted for already. So you got a gap of about $115,000 that needs to come from your portfolio. That's a big chunk of change, right? These are bigger numbers, right? But we're considering the family, they're high income family right now, high cost of living area, want to maintain that. So it makes sense. $115,000 coming from the portfolio. If we use that 4% rule, we take $115,000 times 25. That gives us a portfolio value of $2.875 million. Okay, so almost $3 million in portfolio money is what we would need to generate that income with a 4% distribution rate, okay? So big chunk of change, 2.8 million, but there's a high income family, they've been saving diligently, the market's been performing, so not out of their reach by any means, okay? And the initial question I had at the beginning of this video was, do we really need 25 times? So let's take a look at that. So if we have $115,000 that we need from our portfolio, but our total spending is $215, right? What's the multiple here that we need? So we're talking about $2.8 million. So really what we want to do is take that $2.875 million divided by 215,000. And that gives us a multiple of around 14, okay? So 14 versus the 25 that we were talking. Of course, there's a little bit of a wild card here. We got to consider what the makeup of this investment portfolio is. If it's all pre-tax, your numbers are going to need to be a little bit higher because you don't really have $2.8 million. You're going to pay tax on everything that comes out of that. If you have a mix of Roth, taxable, and pre-tax, then the numbers change again. So that's an important distinction and consideration in the conversation here. Now, the other thing is, this is an example of a federal family where one spouse is a federal employee. If both spouses are federal employees and they have two pensions coming in that are similar, you could see this multiple drop below 10, right? So, and depending on what the spending is, of course. But so those are how the numbers change a good bit. So when you're talking about 25 all the way down to 14 with that one pension in our example, maybe even below 10 if both spouses were federal employees working at a higher level. So that really changes, how much you need to have in portfolio dollars. And if you do have them, that's great. But then that just gives you an opportunity to create legacy, do the things that you really want to do, let that continue to grow. I don't know. It just depends. You have a lot more flexibility from that standpoint. You don't actually need to draw from your portfolio, but you still have it there. So again, as I mentioned, two of the really important considerations, taxes. I mean, we need to be thinking about taxes, managing that part of the equation now while we have an opportunity to, if possible. Avoid those big RMD tax bombs. Talk about Roth conversions or what type of contributions are right for you. And then managing volatility, as you get closer to retirement or into retirement and you need to take an income stream from your portfolio. So getting there is one thing, making it last, making it stretch over hopefully what is an extended period of time. We talk about this all the time, that the average retirement is much longer than it's ever been, which is a wonderful thing, but also presents some challenges when it comes to managing your assets. So I hope you found some value here today, guys. This got a little bit longer than I wanted, but hopefully you stayed with me through the example. If you can, please like, share with a friend, and until next time.